Hello, hello. Welcome to the Five Talents Podcast. I'm your host, Abel Pacheco. I interview the top commercial real estate investors and industry experts so you can learn from their experiences. So if you're an investor, a high W-2 earner, or real estate or tech sales professional that wants to invest in real estate without having to manage properties or leave your day job, then this podcast is for you. Or if you're already investing in real estate, but you're doing it part-time and you want to become a full-time multifamily or full-time commercial real estate investor, this podcast is for you too. You're going to learn a ton. You will learn from real-life multifamily investors and other professionals in the industry. They're going to share their blueprints for success, and I'm super excited that you're here. So I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, hello. This is Abel Pacheco, your host for the Five Talents Podcast. We are super excited today because we have another amazing guest for you, Mr. Stefan Tsvetkov. Stefan, how's it going, brother?
Good. How are you, Abel?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me. I sincerely appreciate it. It's been a pleasure meeting you and getting involved in your world and hanging out at your meetup. And now you're here with me, so I'm excited, man.
Yeah, me too. That's awesome.
Well, good. For those that don't know, Stefan is essentially a data analytics expert. He's one of those investment strategy kind of, I'll say, just mastermind in of itself. Big on the finance background. He's a financial engineer, literally by title, master's of financial engineering from Columbia, and he's a real estate investor himself. And in his former career, Stefan managed $90 billion of $90 billion derivatives portfolio. So he did that with him, with a number of colleagues. But anytime you manage that big of a number in any kind of asset class, in this form derivatives, that's just it's a different mindset, because you're literally engineering financial investments. And the fact that you can put this stuff together, it's math. You're just trying to figure out where should the money go, how should it flow, what's the best way to create additional return. To have Stefan just here on our podcast is a treat. So I'm excited to have you, Stefan. How's it going, brother?
Thank you, man. Yeah, that was an awesome introduction. Yeah, pleasure for me as well. We met a little while ago. You presented for my meetup, and yeah, we're meeting now again. That's great. Yeah. As you mentioned, I have a financial engineering background. That's my prior career in the real estate investor in the small multifamily space in the recent several years. So that's what I've been doing. I speak sometimes on data analytics. I have also a data analytics company called Envvy Analytics. So that's something else that I do. I kind of try to add value to the industry, take my skill set and, help other investors, other operators, syndicators, etc. With my insight, my kind of humble feedback that I have on different topics. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. And let me, if I can, I'll ask you. I'm going to lead you through a series of questions here. Just always curious, because I'm ready to talk about this data. I want to talk about your investing career, but first, before we get to it, man, you're managing $90 billion in derivatives, and now you're investing in commercial real estate. One simple question: why real estate? Why are you doing that? Why is that important to you?
Yeah, well, in my investment portfolio, I would say it's more small multifamily. So, it's more residential. Residential multifamily, and I do look at commercial deals as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a different world for sure. In financial engineering, it's kind of, it's math, and I would say, it's kind of more, it's more analytical for sure. And it's one of the things that has impressed me actually, how in finance, you have if you take hedge funds or, or other financial institutions, they have all these really technical people. It's so the amount of effort that they put on, getting the best data, or getting having the top talent people who would will work with that data is immense. And I feel like in the real estate industry, that's something that's okay, maybe done at Blackstone and some of the big institutional investors, and then the pretty much for the rest of the sector, the mid-range, for example, multifamily or like other CRE indicators, it's not common. It's not common. So it's a different world. I mean, yeah, managing like a derivative. So that's a big derivatives portfolio for an insurance company. That's definitely useful experience. It was like very mixed. It was both equities and interest rate. Like options and options futures, etc., like kind of a mixed experience. So it was a good experience for me to see like a relatively broad sector, like because very often in finance when you're a trader you would kind of focus on like a really small, like a really small niche, and that was for the organization that I worked with was it was a broader experience. So that was good. And yeah, I mean that when you have such a big portfolio, one of the things is you kind of move the market if you're sending
Yeah.
a trade. So that
You're
was
literally a market maker.
yeah, you kind of you're kind of cautious all the time. You don't wanna, like you have a big impact on the market. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one difference from when you're a private investor, I would say, where you don't have like over there you're thinking, okay, if you trade, I think if you trade anything that's not S&P, you're literally going to move the market with your trade. So you want to even avoid that and kind of like have it, be more cautious. So it's a different world for sure. Now on the other hand, it's not your own money, it's not. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just a different experience. Yeah, it's an institutional experience. I'd say, the private investing experience is, somewhat more interesting. I mean, some aspects, because it's your own,
Yeah.
you're creative. You pick your own strategies.
That's
So,
awesome. Well, that's good to hear, man. And so how many properties or how many doors are you personally invested? How long have you been investing
oh,
in your own?
yeah, I am investing. I do like very small deals, like 3-4 units. How many doors? I mean, yeah, it's like kind of do more flips. So I mostly like sell them. So
Mhm.
so I've done like a few deals at this point. Like I'm trying to raise the deal flow. I don't focus on doors. Like my focus is primarily like two things. I would say in personal investment, I try to pursue extreme cash flow, call it. So my goal is, for example, if I can get a property that has even a 20 cap that is really cheap, I'd rather get the really that over like a more expensive, let's say $1 million property. I mean, I started like, okay, so my first property was a fourplex. Purchase price was about like 720K. It had a good cap. It had a little bit of price inefficiency as well. But that was, I later found I can make the same cash flow with like really even much cheaper deals. Um, that's something I can talk about, actually, some of the kind of myths around cap rate and stuff like that, because
Yeah, we
I
can
can feel
we
the
can
cash
definitely
flow.
get into it. Let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
just describe a couple things though so far what you said. So fourplex, literally four doors, one property. For
That
those
was my
that are
first
just,
property. Yeah, 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 yeah.
maybe not quite the real estate folks, but investors,
Sorry?
and then also 720 grand, a 20 cap, 20
No, that was
20%.
the cap.
Sorry.
No, 720K. No, not 20 cap. That would be crazy. Yeah. No, that was about 10, close to 10, like 10 cap, actually. It was a good
Yeah.
cap.
And so the difference between a 10 cap and a 20 cap, for those that are like, okay, well, that capitalization rate, basically the return of money if it was a cash deal, 20%
Yeah.
return or a 10% return.
Yeah.
So there's evaluations, and typically people say the higher the cap rate, maybe the higher the risk, but the more return, it's a risk adjusted kind of return. At the lower cap rate, it's
Mhm.
typically more stable, that type of thing. But so there's all different types of cap rates. So this is awesome, Stefan. Before we go too deep into the real estate side, so I know it sounds like we know what you're doing today. This is awesome. How did you start this career in engineering? You went to Columbia. You got your master's financial engineering.
Yep.
When did you when was all of this stuff? How many years ago has it been since you finished?
Yeah, so that was so I did my master's. So I did my master's in what is it? I finished it in 2010. So okay, it's about like close to
2010.
years. Yeah, like about 11 years.
Did you already know you were going to invest in real estate back then, or did you stumble across it through the years?
Well, I wanted to. I would say I was always kind of like thinking maybe I want to go to Europe. I wanted to like I wasn't like always sure like where. I wasn't sure of my vocation back then. I guess so much when I was younger.
Yeah,
Like as
yeah.
I was kind of like an H-1B. For some people who are H-1B visa kind of professional in New York. You know, you kind of you don't know like are you going to be here forever? And you're young and you're like super like picking, hesitant, etc. So that
Because
I think that was
you came
holding me
from
back then.
you moved from Hungary, right?
No, Bulgaria actually.
Bulgaria. Sorry.
Yep, yep.
Uh, s-
Um,
so you
I mean,
moved
yeah,
from
it's pretty
Bulgaria.
cool.
What year was that?
So that was in 2009. 2009. So just came here for my master's in 2009. It was a one year master's. Then I went to work in finance. I worked in finance for about 10 years. Um, and yeah, the last years of working in finance, I started investing in real estate, and now I'm full time in real estate. Like I said, primarily like small multifamily flips, and I don't focus on doors or like accumulating doors. It's more like flips and buy and hold, trying to take advantage of
Yeah,
the
very good. This
inefficiency in the market. Mhm.
Yeah, man, I am every time I hear somebody coming from another country and coming over here and taking full advantage of the quote unquote American dream, I mean I love it. I just like I'm a fan. I'm super
Well,
excited for you. Congratulations. And the H1B one, it's like a temporary thing, right? You
yeah,
come
the
over, you kind of
H1B,
work, and then it's
yeah.
are you going to stay? Are you not? That's kind of what the dilemma was for you then.
That's yeah. Back then, that was. I mean, it wasn't that hard back then. I think later
Yeah.
they made it. I think a little bit more difficult. I don't know if maybe under Trump administration potentially, etc. It
Yeah.
got like slightly, even harder. I think for people to
Yeah.
to get it or even to stay and stuff like that. But yeah, it was. I don't. I think it was about 3 years that was like sort of, and then I think then I got another one for 3 years and whatever. Then I got my green card, and and now I'm, whatever. It kind of takes a while. So yeah.
Yeah, brother. Well, man, congratulations, and I'm super happy for you. And so,
Yeah.
um, as a foreigner coming in, trying to learn, you had many multiple different obstacles, language,
Mhm.
culture,
Yep.
all the extra things. Can you
Yep. Yep.
can you tell us, I don't even forget about real estate for a moment because all
Yep.
this stuff transcends. Like, what kind of obstacles did you have to overcome just to get,
Yes.
just
It's
to
so
get to
many.
that point, man? I mean, tell us what you overcame, and I'd love to learn, how
Yeah.
you did it so I can apply whatever I can.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was so many. I would say on the personal side more, like when I
Yeah.
came, like I came to my master's, I was back then, I was like, obviously super young. With my then girlfriend, we were kind of a, long distance relationship, at the time. It was, it was difficult, and like you're abroad, you're 22, you leave all your friends essentially,
Man.
and and I had it pretty well kind of before, like, socially and all, and like you leave everything and your girlfriend is also away, and it was like really difficult, and all the cultural differences, and you need to adjust, and and it's also really stressful, like in masters, you need to like keep looking for a job, and you take on a
Jeez.
lot of debt. So I took on I don't know if I should say this here, but like
Let us know. Yeah.
dad in Eastern Europe, he took like on like 100,000, in debt at the time in loan, which is a lot of money if you come from Eastern Europe.
100K of debt is a
100K, like
commitment in and of
that
itself.
was a big commitment, yeah. And if you don't get a job, like you're screwed. What do you do? It's like,
Yeah.
because you're like deeply in debt, So it was, that was, we all know the like tuition costs in US and all that, and it's difficult, there's so many people who do that, there are people from Asia and so many places who they spend a lot of money, on their masters, and then they, if they end up not finding a job, it's a big risk, It's a big risk.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that was kind of a lot of stress, I think, from that. But it worked out okay.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to interrupt you again, man. I'm just so excited, so I apologize. But so a couple things that I wrote down. You literally had, to leave the network of friends, family, people that like, that cared about, taking on the risk to do it. You're going to take on $100K of debt, essentially, and that risk in of itself, that mental block that you overcame. I know that there's a lot of people listening in their positions that have never been able to invest any of their money. Who cares if it's single family or commercial or stock market or whatever, and they can't get to the mindset of overcoming that because they're just, it's so much risk. I would say there's very little things that you probably done. That was one of the biggest risk you've probably ever taken, right?
I agree. Yeah, that was definitely a big one. And I would say it's even something on the mindset side. Like I'm actually so grateful to my dad at the time, because he was able to. He didn't have the money, but he had the capacity to borrow as much. Even having the capacity to borrow as much is unusual over there, because you wouldn't have sufficient income even to be able to just get like a personal loan or whichever for that. And it was so that was a big, I think, like sort of like mindset thing for him that he was able to do, and he helped me. I think in Eastern Europe at the time there would be very few parents who would do that. So, so that was great.
Wow.
Yeah, that was great.
But even that,
helped me.
your dad taking the risk for you to come over, and then you taking another risk. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I took it. I paid it off. Within 2 years.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I love it, man.
I paid my girlfriend's tuition too, so both of them within 2 years. So
boom. I love it, man. Congrats. And I'm sure your dad is ecstatic, about everything. And that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, congratulations. Okay, so thank you for making me smile ear to ear. I'm grateful that you would just share some of this personal stuff, because to hear that what you overcame just to kind of get to this position, a lot of people have their own mental hurdles, maybe not even as big as risking that much, but just overcoming a little risk to invest. So tell us what in your perspective, how you overcame some of that risk. What was it that allowed you to say, you know what, I'm going to go do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think for me in real estate, what has been like, okay, how am I going to overcome like some of the physical aspects? Like for me, that's the tough one. Like some of the fact that it's a physical asset, you take care of other people, you have tenants in there, you take care of, like some of the renovation, how is that going to work? I think that's for me, the main concern is, okay, I'm not so much even of an asset manager, but to an extent, I hold some of the properties too. So it's still like asset management, and now you're responsible, become responsible for an important aspect of like people's livelihood in a way. It's their housing. It's a big responsibility. This for me, as far as hurdles, I would say in real estate, I maybe haven't had, well, I do have some hurdles, of course, but not so much as far as, like feeling limited, like, am I going to be able to do this on the financial side or on the investment side? But am I going to be able to do it really on the personal side and affecting people's lives and all that? That for me,
man,
is the biggest.
That's real.
Yeah, the
That's
biggest.
real.
To be honest, and it's still a challenge. Like, how do you handle like all these physical aspects, and being able to also being operationally efficient, being able to respond to people on time and all that? That's difficult.
Yeah, well, that's real. I mean, everything that you're mentioning, right? Because we're trying to make sure we have the best environment for our tenants, our renters, and it's their home, right? So yeah, we're trying to make it a good one. So anyways, thank you very much, Stefan, for giving us some insight. So anyways, let me get you to some expertise points, because you are one of those individuals that is amazing in the data side. So you published data today on overvalued real estate markets. Correct. Can you just, what does that mean? Tell us a little bit about it, and what did you find?
Yeah. So to give a bit of a background where I started, how it started. So there is, so in finance, so for example, at hedge funds, one guy follow is John Hussman. So John Hussman is the founder of Hussman Investment Trust. So he is a PhD in finance, I believe. And so he publishes like certain metrics that are, that are predictive of like subsequent S&P total returns, especially on the downside. So sort of that would be called like in finance valuation metrics. So sort of measures for if the stock market is overvalued or is undervalued, etc. And the most like common measure that people hear, like people who invest in stocks, is price to earnings ratios, like P ratios, if for those of you who are acquainted with that. And so that's like one. And so he had published a study where he was showing, okay, P ratios have certain predictiveness of, of subsequent total returns afterwards. So like about 76% correlation. And then at his firm, they had devised like better ones. And then one of his measures had like about 91% actually correlation. And that's, again, that's not guessing the timing or something. It's more of a, for example, if a market is, if a security is overvalued, then there's going to be this kind of correlation to the downside, sort of the downside magnitudes that could emerge in that security. And so that was one thing that kind of like, was impressed on me, like from finance, that I felt can be done in real estate. The second one was Ingo Windsor. So Ingo Windsor is a guy in Massachusetts who publishes data on pretty much an overvalued real estate market. So he was in 2005 and 2006, he was on CNN, and he was talking that certain markets in California and Florida are dangerously overvalued. So he was a guy who inspired me that, okay, it was actually predictable, or not in terms of timing, but one could know by looking at deviations from price earnings ratios. One could know ahead of 2007, back in 2005, one could very clearly discern in the data and see in the data which markets were overvalued. And so that inspired me. So I did this back study, trying to see essentially like what were the predictors of the crash back then, and trying to apply it to the current time. And in the study, so I looked at like different metrics. I looked at like volatility, like price volatility in different states and counties. I looked at risk-adjusted returns. They call it kind of sharp ratio in finance. I looked at autocorrelation, like correlation with the broad market, like things like this. But what seems to be best predictive, and I do a slightly more advanced metric at my analytics LLC, but in a simple sense, what everybody can do by himself is just taking the price to income ratio historically in their market over a kind of moving time window. Let's say 20 years time lag, and this window keeps moving, and you take like an average of that, and then deviation from this value is gonna be an incredible predictor, especially at the state level of subsequent downside risk. So that's what happened here. So in 2007, so basically I did like this study, and it showed like the big four markets that dropped back then were California, Florida, Nevada, Arizona, that dropped like 40 to 60%. And the valuations for those markets, the overvalued metric for those markets, was also 40 to 60% roughly. So the correlation was, depending on the data you use, was like 83, 85% correlation, predictiveness of the metric, and the subsequent actual returns, which is amazing, because let me tell you why. Like in real estate, so people look at population, right? You guys like in Mount Washington in the case, you look at where population is going. If you look at population alone, just population, and you look at it even at the state level, and you predict the prices, do you know what's the predictiveness? 40%.
40%.
40%. That's not bad. Okay, now if you combine population and income, it gets much higher.
Plus income, it gets higher.
If you combine with income, it gets much higher. Exactly. But I'm just saying, just population is 40%. Now, that is where you're comparing population. Two variables are moving together. Population is growing, and whatever, and and prices are growing and they're moving simultaneously. The predictiveness, like before 2007, is like the metric at the peak, and the subsequent drops in those markets that happens over the course of 4 or 5 years. This is actually kind of predicting the future, and that has 83% correlation on the state level, which is amazing. So what this is saying to me is that real estate is very fundamental. So real estate is very fundamental. Exactly. By being so fundamental, it just makes it easy for us, for people like me to.
It's better for us. Let me pause you real quick. Let me pause you because this is awesome. Before you keep going, because this is super awesome. Let me just try to summarize a couple of things, right? So by looking at past corrections, we'll call them that, in the market, overvalued versus valued markets. We looked at a lot of, in the general market stocks or whatever, it's the PE ratio, price versus earnings. And you can take that and look at a historical trend, and then you're taking those deviations between those two, and then you're looking for the highest bit of correlation and say, hey, within a 70 or 80, 90% correlation, like we believe those two things are tied together, and you can tell where a drop, or by looking at the past. The past predicts doesn't maybe predict the future, but we're looking at past to try to predict the future. And as you did this with real estate, you kind of took that same mindset for population and income. Look for the again, the ratios between those, and looked back over time. Now you can kind of take that same PE ratio and take it for in what we're doing in real estate, and look for the same correlation to help us say, where should we invest in real estate? Is that right? Is that decent?
Absolutely, Abel. Or rather not so much where should we invest, where prices are going to grow, but just as a risk management, to stay protected, like kind of to keep focus. Should we invest now? Let's say I did it at the beginning of COVID. I was just concerned myself, like people say, prices are really high. What if the market takes a down? I was on Clubhouse, one evening, and like there were so many people asking these questions. They were like so concerned, and now of course different environment, because now we have inflation and it's like a very positive environment. It's like a different environment in that sense. But I mean, it's still like now and then, people all the time ask themselves these questions. And for me, like this study was kind of, I feel, took away for myself as an investor, at least took away some of this guesswork. And now I can have, sort of a more objective measure of, that's what's going on. Like if I do, even though I focus more on kind of short term, like kind of like maybe flips and stuff like that in the Northeast, because that's what the Northeast is good for. Obviously, it's not a place for appreciation, right? So that's understandable. But still, what if I hold some property, in the Northeast, can it take a downturn? Can the price take a downturn? And that's it's pretty much very unlikely for the majority of states in the Northeast, because they're actually even undervalued. So it's just this kind of, exactly. And it's just, this gave me like a perspective. And in 2007, so what was, just like to give like to people some examples. So like we mentioned, the big markets that dropped back then, they were very predictable by their valuations, by their price income ratio.
Which I know usually you have a really good presentation as visual, but since we're on podcast, it doesn't translate well. Hello. You're listening to the 5 Talents Podcast. I'm your host, Abel Pacheco. If you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you're serious about achieving financial freedom. Are you ready to create your own path through multifamily investing for yourself and your family? Then I know you're going to appreciate our Investor's Guide to Multifamily Investing. It's titled Tackling Commercial Real Estate the Easy Way. We use this guide to invest ourselves in $93 million worth of real estate. So we're going to show you the basic mechanics of multifamily syndications and how to evaluate your next passive investment opportunity. So the best part, if you subscribe to our podcast now, leave us a review and a rating. I'm going to give you a free copy of our ebook. So please take a moment to do that now. Once you've done that, go to 5tcre.com/ebook, 5tcre.com/ebook, Make sure to let us know you left a review, and we're going to send you a free copy. So thank you so much for subscribing to the 5 Talents Podcast. We really appreciate it. But tell us which states and give us an idea of what happened back then, and then maybe take us to the current. That would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So just several examples. So California, Nevada, Arizona, Florida that I mentioned were 40 to 60% roughly overvalued at the time, and not the exact same numbers, but roughly similar drops in their actual price.
Already overvalued. You can kind of see it by the data, and they took a drop that kind of take them down to the overvaluation percentages.
Exactly, and that drop took a while. So keep in mind, this is so very fundamental. That drop on average.
What percentages did they drop, roughly speaking?
40 to 60%, roughly speaking.
40 to 60%. And then how long was that time that it actually took them to drop?
Yes, so on average, over the course of about 4 years. Different in every state, different in every county, but generally about 4 years until about 2011, most of it was kind of different. Like some dropped faster, some could be from 2, some could even take 6 years in some
tell us. I know the answer to this because I live here, but tell us how Texas fared during that drop.
So Texas fared really well, right? You know this, right? So Texas was well in the state level. Now they're obviously different counties.
I'm in San Antonio, Texas, is where I'm in too. Specifically, I know we did pretty decent through the
exactly.
times,
Yeah. So that's a great example. So at the time, there were 10 states that were undervalued. Out of those states was Texas. Texas was 5% undervalued at the time. Because Texas was undervalued, the drop at the state level was only 4%. The 4% was actually the median drop across those 4 undervalued states. And 4% was also the average income drop in the US, which we can say essentially what this means is real estate is so fundamental that you have the markets that are undervalued. In valuation terms, in the biggest crisis in recorded US history, in valuation terms, they didn't drop because it just incomes dropped. So their prices dropped with income, but in price to income terms, they stayed the same. So Texas is a great example. And as you know, the market that has boomed afterwards, where, a lot of the smart money are investing in, etc. One of the 2 big markets can say nowadays for multifamily. So it's a great market and that has performed really well. And 4%. So it was practically unaffected. Within specific, I can pull, the details for San Antonio, etc. Have it all at county level. But
we're gonna talk more after stuff. I'm gonna pick your brain for sure, brother.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. That's first.
That's cool. So you're looking at the historical trends, and then how does this translate to today? Right? People are probably like, what's going on, Stefan? Tell me the future, brother.
Exactly. Yes.
What do you see today?
It's very interesting. And the reason why I want to say is because some markets, some countries abroad are considered overvalued. And I don't have data for anything abroad myself, but I've seen similar studies. For example, a study by Niraj Shah, I think is an economist, that was published in Visual Capitalist. So that study showed Canada, just to give some example, Canada real estate, just very broad. Of course, there's specific small markets there, etc. But Canada real estate was very overvalued, and so was Scandinavia, New Zealand, Australia, and to some lesser extent UK. So those are some foreign countries. So it's interesting that real estate actually in some countries currently is overvalued, but not in the US. So in the US,
wow. So we apply the same to a global perspective. It's pretty good for the US across the board.
True. Yeah. So in the US, as it aligns with the intuition of all of us as professionals, kind of in the space, investors in the space, who we have a sense it's a pretty good market, pretty strong market. It's it has good fundamentals. It's fairly valued. There are a few exceptions to that. The main exception is the state of Idaho. So I see Idaho at 25% overvalued. This is the only kind of sharper overvalued state, and I have it at the counties and sort of city as a proxy for cities. So Boise in Idaho I always mention it as an example. I kind of feel bad, for some people who
Poor
invest.
Boise, poor Boise. They're getting hammered on this podcast.
I don't want to be saying they're taking more risk, because it's because Boise has done outstanding. So Boise has done outstanding in price term, has really boomed, and Idaho, the state of Idaho, has really boomed as well. But it just has gone a little bit, overvalued. So Boise at the beginning of COVID was about 33% overvalued. And I don't have their recent incomes data, so their incomes data is kind of lagging. But their prices grew since the beginning of last year, grew another 10%. So they appear to be on slightly more. I think I have an estimate about 37% overvalued. But this is the only city that is so much overvalued out of like 800 cities, the most overvalued city in the US right now. But other than that, the second number two is, I think, like Las Vegas, about 18%. And, there are a few other at about 15%. It's pretty mild.
Give us a few of the next ones. Number one, number two, who's 3 and 4, 5?
Let me see. Okay, let me first say the states. So states, Idaho 25%. The next one is Nevada, and that's just what I see. So Nevada 16, Arizona 14, Colorado 14. The District of Columbia 12%. Texas is at 10%. I would say that's kind of towards fairly valued. 0 to 10% is kind of fairly valued. For a market that is very strong, it's normal. It's nothing to be concerned. Texas is going to continue doing great. It's just something to be thinking at the time of whenever
it's an extra data point.
An extra data
that
point
will help you take a little less risk, more risk, whatever, risk adjusted return, right? Okay, cool.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So but it's mild. I would say Idaho is the only that I would go that's a sharply overvalued, and then we can say somewhat overvalued Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado.
Got it. Okay.
So that's kind of where I would be more concerned. Like even like Florida, like the big markets, Texas and Florida. Texas is at 10% and Florida is at 9%. And I think Florida was maybe at 11% at the beginning of COVID. So it even has slightly less overvalued become actually.
Got it.
So it's not that bad at all. And and in terms of some cities, I would say, what they have? Yeah, just trying to find. So the cities data. So most overvalued. Well, yeah. So Boise is number one. I see like a city, for example, the city of Spokane in Washington, is at 18%. Phoenix, Arizona, 15% overvalued. There's some very strong markets. Again,
Phoenix has been pretty hot.
It's pretty hot. Again, I'm not by no means. Exactly. I'm by no means saying that these are not great markets. They're pretty great markets. It's just they're a little bit overvalued.
At a peak, just like before, over 4 years, if something were to shift or change, right? It's a drop by the overvaluation.
Exactly. Yes. It's something what's going to be more interesting. I would say these numbers now, I don't think they so much would matter, because now with inflation and everything, I would not think. You never know. I wouldn't think the market is going to take it down.
Now inflation, right? Jeez.
But what's going to be interesting, and what's going to be, at least for me, to watch, like also within my own investment practice, is okay, what's going to happen from now, like in the next 2-3 years? Because between like if back before in 2002, real estate was super fairly valued. By 2004, 2005, over the course of 2-3 years, it became like, so we imagine from like zero or close to zero, it reached to like 40% in some markets. So like over 2-3 years only. So that's going to be the interesting thing to watch now. Like I think real estate is looking great now. Also, there's on all kinds of other measures. The cap rate to interest rates are still low for now, and just the cap rate to interest rate spread is amazing. It's really healthy and attractive to investors, right? And all that. So it's all great right now and looking rosy, But just gonna be interesting how that's gonna be reflected now if prices, boom and like increase. What's gonna be 2-3 years now? And that's why I kind of urge, some operators, and especially syndicators, to be frank, who manage like hundreds of millions of assets, to be aware and to just keep a full history of their valuations. You can have this data quarterly, You can have it backwards. You can keep watching it. So that's basically what I do. So when I say, if we say that, let's say Phoenix, Arizona is now at 15% or whatever, like Florida is at 9%. It's not a static number. That's not, to give a label. It just keeps changing. So like keep tracking it. Florida now is at 9. Then next quarter.
Watch the trend. Yeah.
Where is it going? And
Got it.
So those are like some. Mm-hmm.
This has been awesome. So Stefan, I was so excited about just hearing about your personal story, and now I'm even more excited about this data. We'll have to have you talk again soon, and maybe give us one of those quarterly updates or something on the data, brother. I think it would be a good one. So we're coming towards the end of our time. I want to make sure that we give our audience an opportunity to kind of reach out to you. So you started a company called Envvy Analytics. You provide some of this stuff for those that are interested. So tell us who you want to reach out to you, and how do they reach out, or how do they get in contact, or how do I subscribe, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're an investor or like CRE investment manager, and if you want to, get a bit more insight into like your markets and like where they stand in valuation terms. So you can reach to me at envvyanalytics.com. So Envvy with a double V. So envvyanalytics.com, or you can add me on LinkedIn, Stefan Tsvetkov on LinkedIn. So.
Mr. Stefan Tsvetkov, Mr. Stefan Tsvetkov. I love it, brother. Well, thank you very much. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And is there anything we didn't talk about today, or any questions you were hoping I asked that I just didn't get to? Anything else?
No, I think that's a good. We covered a good amount.
Brother, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And for everyone that's listening, go review. Leave us a written review, like and subscribe the podcast. Would appreciate it. Go over to Stefan's, his website, and connect and get in his world, get a little bit more of that information and data. And that would be awesome for us to have you on our next show as a listener as well. So I appreciate everyone's support. And this is Abel Pacheco, your host for the 5 Talents Podcast. Stefan, you're the man, brother. Thank you for listening to this episode of the 5 Talents Podcast with your host, myself, Abel Pacheco. Each week, we're going to bring you interviews from industry experts and commercial real estate investors who followed their dreams and achieved massive success. Before you leave, let me ask you a few questions. Did you enjoy this episode? Did you learn something valuable? Was your mind stretched to what's possible and what you can achieve? Do you want other experts just like the one you heard today? If you answered yes to any or all of those questions, then please take a moment to subscribe to the 5 Talents Podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and most importantly, leave us a written review. Tell us what you liked, tell us your favorite guest, give us any feedback. I'm excited to learn and improve so you can get a more valuable show. So thank you again for subscribing to the 5 Talents Podcast.